welcome back to Vilangi Art, a channel made for educators and artists. I'm going to dive right in. I got my coffee. Hopefully you can grab yours too. I'm going to dive right into the next video, which is all about IEP. And what does that look like in the classroom? When you start off as a new teacher, you hear all these abbreviations. So IEP is definitely one of them. So let's go ahead, you grab your coffee, and we will dive into it. So what is IEP? IEP stands for Individualized Educational Program. So this is usually a plan made by a team of people. It's not just people that work at the school. They come up with a plan to help the students succeed in the classroom. It is a legal document in the United States that outlines the special education and related services that a student with a disability is entitled to receive in a public school setting. So, students that have disabilities, remember that it is not their disability that defines who they are. That is just one thing that they kind of have to work through and deal with throughout the day. So that is really important to keep in mind. You learn that very quickly, even working in mental health, that the individuals you work with, that is not who they are, the disability that they hold. And you also, as an educator, you want to make sure that they have the same opportunities as any other students in the classroom, and that they're not excluded in any way from any of the curriculum that's being built up in the classroom, or any lessons or any group projects. These are some of the more challenging students at the school. So in the classroom, definitely sometimes there's classroom disturbance. There's yelling out. There's sometimes running out of the classroom. Sometimes swearing. Just a lot of different behaviors do tend to come up. And I'm going to try to put some tools in this video on how to work with those challenges that may come up in the classroom, because you're teaching maybe 30 students, and then you will have 5 or 6 students sometimes with an IEP plan. So how do you juggle all of that as an educator? I think that can be very stressful, and it can be very challenging. Biggest thing definitely is positive reinforcement. You want to always give them compliments when they are doing the right thing, but also, just like any other student, you want to set up clear expectations, and you don't want to treat them differently. That's really the goal. It's treating them just like any other student in your classroom. So how does that look? Of course, they will come in with aides. Usually they will have some other staff members that are helping them. It's okay to even tell the aides, like, hey, this is kind of what I do in my classroom. If you could help by, give the aides some direction. That helps them out when they enter your classroom, because you have to remember the aides, they're walking with that one student to every classroom. But every classroom has different expectations by whatever educator is running that classroom. So it's okay to give a little bit of guidance to the aides, so they are aware of your expectations in your classroom and how it's kind of run, and how they can better help that student in the end. So you don't have those outbursts and those classroom disruptions taking place. Okay, so who is involved with building an IEP plan? It is important to note that the eligibility for an IEP is determined through a comprehensive evaluation process conducted by a team of professionals, including parents, guardians, teachers, and specialists. When I mean specialists, usually there will be like a therapist. It could be a physical therapist, mental health therapist. I've even been in IEP teams where there's even a doctor that shows up. So all different professionals come together to help the student so they can succeed. The IEP team considers the individual needs of the student and determines whether an IEP is necessary to provide the appropriate support and services for the educational success. So it's basically just a plan. I'll dive into what actually is on that plan. And sometimes there's a plan for the teacher, sometimes there's a plan for the student. So it can get a little bit confusing. But I'll get into what that involves. So, who falls into this category? Students who have been identified as having a disability that significantly impacts their ability to access and make progress in the general education curriculum may be eligible for an individualized educational program. So that is why it takes so many different people on the team to even kind of evaluate if the student actually needs an IEP. Um, IEPs are usually evaluated every 3 months, 6 months, and then an entire year. I've seen some students evaluated over a year. So this is not like a quick plan that's kind of thrown together and then see if it flies. You're kind of, the student has to try it out for a little while. If things don't work, then it needs to be modified, and then new accommodations need to be put in place. And once again, that requires multiple meetings. That the whole team has to come together again, especially the main teacher that the student is working with, and then the doctors and therapists and social workers, and and then all some of the administration at the school as well will be at the meeting. So, how an IEP plan is used in the classroom. Some different tools I just want to throw out there is setting kind of clear expectations in the classroom from the start, kind of helps. Um, Also, establishing routines in the classroom, especially with students with the IEP, if they know what the expectations are, the routines, especially through transition. If you have a lot of transitions in your 30 minutes that you're teaching, or 40 or 60 minutes, then you need to give those students time to transition to the next activity in a way that's kind of not going to stress them out. Transition is huge, and it's the start of the class, it's work time, and then it's also leaving the classroom. So those are all transitions that you have to kind of keep in mind as a teacher. If the transition is too fast, so once again, it comes down to pacing. If the transition is too fast, that stresses some of those students out, and they tend to then have outbursts, and it's then a stressful environment, and it stresses your other students out too. So you're trying to avoid that. The whole goal here is to keep being able to teach and not have chaos break out in your classroom because you have all these personalities going on. The next thing is providing engaging a curriculum, basically. So keeping them engaged with instruction, interesting kind of tasks. If they're not so interested and they're not focused, do you have a backup plan? Do you have something else they can kind of fill in a strange 10 minutes that they're not into the lesson? So always have a plan B in place. With students with IEPs, you need to always have more than one lesson in place for that class period because they may not care about what you're teaching at the time. And then they will engage back in later on. So, in that way, it's a little bit different than some of the other students where they can stay engaged from the start to the middle to the end. Using positive reinforcement is also huge. So praise everything they do. If they are following the rules, they're treating others in the classroom with respect, Even maybe the way they place their work in the tray when they're done. Just praise everything they do. They'll have a bigger respect for you as a teacher too. They are observant. They will see that you are aware of what they're doing, and that you're showing them attention as well. Lastly, consistently enforcing rules and consequences. Enforcing rules and consequences fairly and consistently. Students will know if you're not consistent. It only takes that one or two times where you're not consistent, and the whole class kind of sees that. So try to stick to your word. It can be very challenging, it can be hard to do, and it's for an entire 9 months, it's hard to stay consistent. But um, don't put up with all behavior in the classroom that disturbs the classroom. I would say if you need to make that phone call to have the child removed or have the aide maybe take that student for a walk, that definitely helps. And then have them come back into your classroom so they're not disturbing the learning environment. So, some students that may enter the classroom with an IEP, I'm going to just go through some of the diagnoses that some of these students do hold. Some are autism, so all different spectrums of autism. Some have learning disabilities. For example, they are dyslexic. Some have intellectual disabilities, and that significantly limits their functions in the classroom as well. Emotional disturbance, emotional and behavioral challenges. This could come from home life, it could come from traumas that the student may have endured, and these students usually do require some extra counseling. Another one is speech and language impairment. Some students, it's not so much that they don't speak the same language, but they may not speak at all. They may come in mute. As a teacher, these students, it'll take a little bit longer to gain trust to kind of communicate with those students. They don't give out their trust right away. They're very quiet, very shy, and just, I guess, keep that in mind. Another one is hearing impairment. Some students, they are limited in how much they can hear. So that can make it hard if you are up there talking as a teacher and they are missing the instruction because they have limited hearing. Visual impairment. Some students just have trouble seeing. Some are partly blind, and that may require some specialized instruction as well. Orthopedic impairments. This category includes students with physical disabilities or impairments that affect their mobility, coordination, or physical access to educational facilities. So some may kind of have wheelchairs, may have trouble walking in the classroom. So I know with my art classroom, I have a lot of tables, so I have to make sure that the wheelchair can move throughout my art class. That's just an example of that. And then some just may have some other health impairments. It could be epilepsy, it could be asthma, it could be diabetes. It's something that requires them to leave and maybe see the nurse for a little bit. And then the last one is traumatic brain injury. So some students, that will definitely affect their cognitive, physical, emotional, and social functioning. They may require, again, specialized interventions and support. So these are just some of the diagnoses. There is a lot more. I just wanted to highlight some of the ones you may see a little more than others in the classroom. So what is included in an IEP plan? The abbreviation for this is called SMART, so SMART. Starting with S, specific. The goal is specific to a subject or a skill. So it shouldn't be like a vague goal, and like it's saying very specific and one task at a time. M, measurable. It should be measurable through either data or charts or curriculum or tests to measure the student's growth. Attainable. The goal should be very attainable. So whether it's a week long, 3 months, or a whole month, it should be attainable for the student. It can feel hopeless for the student if it's a goal that is a little bit far fetched. Next one is results oriented. Start with a small goal and build upon it so that the goal grows bigger. So you always start with a smaller goal and then extend off from that. Time bound. So goals will be set weekly, monthly, and every 3 months because you want to do this because some students will achieve that goal in the first month or so. And so you want to then come up with other goals that they can try to tackle and succeed at. These SMART goals will not be, they will not be set by the teacher. These will be set by the IEP director at the school. So usually she will do the write-up, she or he will do the write-up for this and also bring the team together to figure out how to integrate this into the classroom. So some IEP directors love to have the student actually have their own worksheet for the goal in place. So it may include different targets that that student is working on. And yes, it will have something more like, especially for teaching elementary, it'll have more like emojis, like smiley face. How are they feeling that day? Or what are they good at for that day? What do they want to get better at? What do they want to improve at? And then usually that'll be signed by the IEP director and the teacher or the caregiver and the any aides in place. So as a teacher, what your expectations are is to basically make sure you're collaborating with your IEP team and communicating with them. Sometimes the school day gets busy, but emailing and kind of maybe talking with them or setting up a meeting if you have questions about how to help the student in the classroom. Another one is just understanding individual student needs. Familiarize yourself with the student's goals and how to help them in the classroom. The next one is just helping the student with differentiated instruction. So if that student, for example, if you are teaching and you are writing on the board and you know that that student has a limited vision impairment, then you need to know as a teacher to move that student up closer to where you're writing on the board. Knowing that one thing you want to keep is a kind of a folder of all the IEPs as the IEP director hands you the IEPs or puts it in your mailbox to kind of keep it in a nice little file for yourself. And a lot of teachers just kind of keep it in a binder or a folder that they can quickly pull out as they have that student in class. So you can quickly read about what that student's needs are. This can be a little more challenging when you're an elective teacher and you are sometimes teaching the entire school. So I try to break up the IEP papers into each class for myself, but it can be very challenging. Another one is, as a teacher, you just want to monitor their progress. Speaking from an art teacher's perspective, I do try to monitor their progress in painting, how they're kind of putting their work away. Are they kind of getting included in the classroom culture? Because usually those students will follow kind of the same class, so they get to know the other students in class. And I kind of watch for that and how that builds throughout the year. Also, another thing is just providing individual support to those students. You never want them to feel like they are excluded. So, as an art teacher, if I am working with the class and I'm looking at their paintings or their drawings, I do make a point to go and check in with my students with the IEPs, what they're creating, look at their artwork just like any other student. Like I said, do not treat them differently. That's the biggest message here. Also, communicating with parents throughout the IEP process can be helpful. Um, Parents know their child better than anybody else. So if there are questions that arise, definitely communicating with the parents and also the IEP team. Also, attending the IEP meetings can be very beneficial, especially hearing from other staff members that do not work at the school, such as the social workers, the doctors, the therapist. Sometimes you can find new insight about the student that might help you in the classroom. You might be unaware that the student is struggling with maybe housing, or something traumatic has happened at their house, with their family. So it is important to go to the IEP meetings so you understand the student 100%. By fulfilling these responsibilities, you can create an inclusive and supportive classroom environment that promotes the success and growth of students with IEPs. Now, it can be very challenging. The whole process can be challenging. It's one of the, I think, harder perspectives of education is to try to work with students with the IEPs, because you also need to be able to understand not only the student but the diagnoses that are walking into your classroom. If you do not have a mental health background, I would recommend kind of looking up maybe some of the diagnoses so you know how to work with it, because some of them are very particular. Whether it's they don't like loud noises, they need to be holding something as instruction is being taken place. I've even integrated like things like poppets in my classroom, different things for them to kind of hold on to. Some like to tap the table as they're learning. I mean, it's like a lot of things that take place for behavior. And it's hard to know it all if you have not worked in mental health. So that this part can seem a little overwhelming. So I definitely recommend educate yourself on the diagnoses of all these um, medical terminologies that are out there. So definitely check out the next video. It's kind of how to close the school year. So it's about self-reflection, kind of reflecting how you did as a teacher, maybe how you could improve for the next year. I can't even believe we're at the end of the school year. It kind of flew by. And it is kind of bittersweet because you have now built your classroom environment. Um, Classroom culture is in place. I'm going to kind of show you ways to kind of slow the curriculum down, get your files organized for the next school year, all the things that have to go into a classroom that what you've built up your classroom and now you got to break everything down and kind of close it out for the summer. And I will see you all in the next video. All right, bye. So if you like all of the content that I have provided today, definitely smash that subscribe and definitely share. Share all my videos. I love the support, and I will see you all in the next video.